is Saturday, December 4th. And we've had a couple people ask if we could record today's session. So we are going to record it because I think some folks might have found out they had something they needed to do. And so we are going to record it for those of you who have to slip off for whatever reason. So I'm going to start first by talking about the purpose of SCSBA's Delegate Assembly. And the overall purpose of SCSBA's Delegate Assembly is to elect the association's leadership, to adopt positions on educational issues that reflect legislative resolutions of our membership, and to adopt changes to the SCSBA Constitution. Now I hear some interference in the background, so if everybody would please be sure to mute yourself, I would appreciate that. Okay, thank you. I guess if we were doing this in person, I could just point to somebody and say, hey, please be quiet back there. But with the Zoom process, we have to please mute so that we don't have background interference. So getting back to the Delegate Assembly and the purpose, in March of this year, letters were sent to each superintendent and board chairman notifying them about the upcoming December 2021 business meeting, which is our Delegate Assembly, and asking for nominations for officer and director positions on the SCSBA Board of Directors. The culmination of the nominations process is being presented to you on December 4th at the Delegate Assembly as the proposed slate of officers and directors for 2022. Nominations may be made from the floor, provided that the candidate's school board has notified the SCSBA president in writing 15 days prior to the Delegate Assembly. So the deadline this year for receive notification for running from the floor was November 19th. November 19th came and went, and we did not receive any nominations from the floor. So there will not be anybody running from the floor this year. Now, SCSBA's resolutions guide the staff and the board officers in dealing with the various issues related to public education that arise during the year. In past years, our resolutions were divided into legislative priorities and statements of belief. In 2020, the Board of Directors approved a recommendation from the Legislative Committee that priorities and belief statements be combined into one list of legislative resolutions. This year, 74 of the 77 member boards have certified delegates who are authorized to cast votes on behalf of their local board on the slate of officers, resolutions, recommended constitutional changes. The number of votes per board is outlined in the SCSBA Constitution and bylaws, and it's based on the number of students enrolled in public elementary and secondary schools per the average daily membership of the previous year. And we get these numbers each year from the State Department of Education. The resolutions outlined in the Delegate Assembly Handbook, which you see here, were emailed to each of you prior to October 12, 2021, and posted on our website. And that will comprise the bulk of the work that you all will be doing as delegates this coming Saturday at our Delegate Assembly. Each resolution must be adopted, amended, deleted, or tabled. Now, at this time, I'm going to call on Debbie Elmore to talk to us a little bit about how resolutions are proposed and recommended.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And I too want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a good crowd, and we appreciate you taking your time to get more informed on the Delegate Assembly. So I'm going to quickly review how resolutions are proposed each year and how they're ultimately recommended to the voting delegates come Saturday to be voted upon. So proposed resolutions are advertised each year. A letter goes out to each school district board asking you to, inviting you to submit resolutions on behalf of the board to us. We also get resolutions that are proposed by the legislative committee of the board of directors of the association, and staff also will recommend resolutions as well, along with changes to resolutions that are recommended ultimately to the board's legislative committee each year, which reviews any new resolutions, any proposed changes, any resolutions submitted by local school boards, and they act upon those resolutions. Once the legislative committee of the board of directors approves the resolutions, they then go to the full board of directors annually, which they then act on that, and whatever actions they take ultimately are then presented to the membership. Most of the resolutions that we adopt, and there's quite a few of them, those we vote on every year. And so changes are often recommended that would amend some of the resolutions to either update language or they could be proposed to be deleted again as cleanup if a new law has been changed and the resolution is no longer needed or is not applicable, then those resolutions are often recommended for deletions. So that is somewhat how the resolutions are, how they're ultimately recommended to you. Under Article 5, Section 8 of the SCSBA Constitution, it outlines the procedures for submission of resolutions. The Legislative Committee of the Board of Directors studies, as I said, all the proposed resolutions that are received, and then ultimately the Board of Directors acts on those. Also, resolutions may be submitted from the floor. However, the delegate assembly will not consider them unless 2/3 of the voting strength of the delegate assembly present and voting elect to suspend the rules to consider any late proposals. The vote to suspend the rules must be taken separately for each late resolution offered from the floor. Um, so that is ultimately how resolutions are recommended.
Okay, and just a few more things before we actually get into the resolutions themselves. Concerning the business meeting rules of procedure that are in your handbook, the business meeting rules of procedure are proposed in your delegate assembly handbook on page 11 through 13. You had received a link to the handbook in your orientation invitation email, and it's also located on the SCSBA website. And on election of board of director positions and slate of officers, the proposed positions for the board of directors can be found in our delegate assembly handbook beginning on page 21. This year's president-elect, Jamie Devine, automatically becomes president at the delegate assembly, so he is not listed on the slate of officers. And now, Debbie, I think at this time we go through some of the resolutions and field questions that people may have about some of the resolutions.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, yes. So the delegate assembly is the association's most important meeting of the year. We, as delegates, will be adopting resolutions, which Scott, I think, said earlier. These resolutions help us as staff that when issues come up during the year, and especially during the legislative session, bills are filed. We often look to our resolutions to guide us in knowing whether we are going to support legislation, whether we oppose it, or whether we're going to ask for it to be amended. So these resolutions really are key for us as part of your legislative staff to be able to know how to approach these issues based on how you all tell us that you want us to represent you, because that's at the end of the day, that's what we are here to do, is to represent what what your positions are. The resolutions not only help us at the state level, but also help us at the national level as well. Some of the resolutions might call for us as an association to get legislation filed. Some of it also, let me get my notes here, excuse me. Some of it also, again, helps us to know whether or not we're going to support a bill or oppose it as well. My notes here are not right here. I'm missing something here. Oh, wow. I'm missing something, Judy, all of a sudden. Okay. All right. So resolutions, I found it. Sorry about that. resolutions are handled in 3 different sections on how they're voted on. In section 1, there are the current legislative resolutions. Again, those are the resolutions that have been in existence that we voted on before. And we take that as a block in section 1. And those resolutions are numbered 1 through 32. Again, if you're looking at your handbook, and they begin on pages 23 through 29. Again, they're handled as a block vote procedure. The only current legislative resolution being recommended for a change is resolution number 12, which is fiscal autonomy. And it's being proposed to be amended. You can see the strike through language is being recommended for deletion, and the underlined language is being recommended for inclusion. All resolutions within this section are done by alphabetical order. Under the fiscal autonomy resolution, we are asking to amend this resolution by deleting the language opposing legislation that would remove a local board of trustees power over the district finances. This is not applicable anymore because of Senate Bill 201 that was passed, which basically under a state takeover of a district, the district's financial authority is transferred to county council. So we're recommending then that language and within that resolution be stricken. In section 2, here's where you will see the proposed new resolution. And there's only one resolution, mental health services, that's being recommended. That's resolution number 33, which is on page 39. Again, this is the mental health services new language that's being proposed, which was approved by the legislative committee and the board of directors. It's on page 39. And basically what this resolution says is that we believe that the General Assembly should appropriate adequate and sustainable funding necessary for school districts to employ sufficient mental health professionals, to include school counselors, social workers, psychologists, qualified to address the needs of school-aged children. And this new resolution is being proposed because of some alarming statistics, which you can read in your rationale regarding children's mental health. In South Carolina, we know in our school districts, we are not all districts have the resources to be able to have adequate staffing in mental health. And this is just an area that it's just growing right now, that we really need to seek state support for this finances. All right. Are we going to take questions for each section, or do I just keep going on? How do you want me to handle that? Okay. Well, I think I would feel comfortable stopping here under the new one and going back to the fiscal autonomy resolution and ask anybody if they have any questions on either of those before I move on to the third section.
Hello, Debbie. This is Melvin, Lancaster County School District. How
Hey,
are
Melvin.
you, Scott, doing today? Just for clarification, you indicated that certain legislative resolutions will be a block vote or be presented as a block for the delegates to vote on. What specific ones are they? Can you just give me the numbers, 1 through whatever, or how, when you say that, what does that mean?
Well, the section 1 is a block vote. So section 1 is all of the current legislative resolutions. That's resolution 1 to 32, again, beginning on pages 23 through 39. And they're handled on block. Now, you can pull resolutions. Delegates can pull those resolutions. The
Yeah.
ones that are not pulled are handled on.
Yeah, what we try to do in order to not have to go through every single resolution, we try to vote on each section as a block. So section 1, as Debbie pointed out, has all the current legislative resolutions, and that's numbers 1 through 32. And we give you, the delegates, the opportunity at the delegate assembly to say, I'd like to pull resolution number 3 for further discussion. And so we'll pull number 3. And then if somebody else has one they want to pull, number 5, we'll pull number 5. And then we'll go ahead and vote on the others as a block and then come back and deal with the ones that were pulled and vote on them separately.
Okay, that's the clarification I was seeking. Thank you, Scott and Debbie.
Yes, sir.
That's a great question too. And I think the other thing I want to follow up too is when a delegate pulls those individual resolutions for discussion and wants to make a change to that, I think at each table, there's a form then that you would then write how you want that language to be changed, submit it, and that is proposed to the delegates to vote on. So that's something else that would help as well. So point that out. Thank you, Melvin. Any other question from anyone on this?
What we like to do also during this session is if anybody has any questions about any of the resolutions, let's go ahead and talk about them now, because odds are somebody else has the same question. But if you have questions about a particular resolution, with the goal of hopefully being able to have a smoother, I guess, delegate assembly on Saturday. If you have a question now that we can answer, we'll be glad to do that.
Hey, Scott and Debbie, my question was on the legislative resolution number 1, board hiring of superintendent.
Okay.
I wanted to understand a little bit more about that resolution because from my perspective, and I know we've got 70, 80 other districts in South Carolina that may be doing something a little differently. But from my perspective, it appears that all the boards are hiring a superintendent, unless I'm in error. But this particular resolution seems to narrow the scope of board's responsibilities just to that area, unless it has to do with fiduciary responsibilities. So I just want to understand a little bit more of what precipitated this particular resolution.
Well, I mean, if you look, it was obviously adopted first in 1993. I think when you read this, it looks like, over time. Why am I echoing?
Well, this resolution, as David says, has been around for a while, Melvin. And what I think the belief at the time that it was first developed, and it actually before I came to the association in '96, I think the intention was to try and prevent micromanagement as an issue at the board level. But if you look at what the resolution actually says, it really reflects everything that you all as school boards have in policies in Section B regarding roles and responsibilities of boards and superintendents. So it's nothing in here that's not really already in your local board policies. It's just sort of a reminder resolution, I guess.
Okay, I was trying to understand if there was a change or something that precipitated this reminder, as much as we're just, again, re-emphasizing this particular resolution now in 2021. So that helps me a little bit understand.
It is, yeah, it's just more of a reminder resolution. I was trying to think in terms of, because a lot of times when bills get filed over at the State House, I'll take that bill and I'll go back and look at our resolutions to get guidance from our resolutions. And I'm not sure I could conjure up a particular bill that would be filed where I would go back and look at this resolution, unless somebody was trying to maybe shift statutorily more board governance responsibility over to the superintendent position. Then I would go back and take a look at that bill and look at our resolution and say, I don't support that now.
Scott and Debbie, this is Sylvia Scott from Lee County. I also think that you're saying it's a reminder to us, it's a reminder to those of us who are veteran or been on the board, but it is also applicable to those persons who are new board members because they would not know that.
Excellent point, Sylvia. Thank you.
And I was going to say, sometimes, you can see when you look at the history, I'm looking at the number of times it was revised. Sometimes you'll have, because you're right, Melvin, there's a lot in this, the statement here, saying that the primary role is to hire the superintendent, stay out of staffing decisions, a lot of it. So I would imagine some of these revision, if we go back, it was probably other pieces of resolutions that then got put in together because it all applied within the same area of hiring and the role of the board in hiring. So it could be some of that as well.
Well, and I've actually got a little bit of a history here now that I'm thinking about it, because back in the day, and this actually was in place shortly after I joined, there used to be a statute that had some districts where you had elected superintendents. And that is no longer in place in South Carolina. Every school board hires a superintendent in South Carolina. I could see the way the legislative landscape has been in past couple of years. I could see where somebody could possibly file a bill that would try to push us back to a situation where we have elected, popularly elected superintendents in school districts. And obviously that would be something that we would not support.
Right. So for me, Debbie, Scott and Debbie, I would likely pull this to amend that language. And I'll write that, but I think the language should speak to not only the hiring, but the evaluation and or termination of the superintendent. Because the way it reads now, it appears that the board simply hires the superintendent. There's no accountability of the superintendent in that language.
Okay. I'm trying to see. Well, okay.
We'll be on the lookout for that.
And Melvin, if you want to call me, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about how you want to amend it. If you want to do that, I'll leave that up to you. All right.
Thank you,
other?
Thank you, Debbie. I will call you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Any other questions on specific resolutions?
Good morning, Scott, Debbie. This is Queenie and Melvin. How y'all doing, Lee County?
Good. Hey, Ms.
A
Queenie.
question, wonderful. A question with what Melvin just proposed as far as languages to clarify the evaluation process. Do that area where it said the board should relinquish, the staffing decision to the superintendent with policies in place to assure equitable hiring, promotion, and dismissal practices. Would that apply to the superintendent as well as to the staffing, or would that apply just to the staffing? Just to piggyback on what Melvin just said.
I think it would apply to the staffing decisions the superintendent makes. I think it's telling the superintendent that policies will be in place to assure equitable hiring, promotion, and dismissal practices.
Okay, so that means that what Melvin is talking about, that does not apply. The policy you're talking about in that area does not apply to the superintendent himself or herself.
I think that what I would say to that would be that if you have in this situation, that's to me is where the accountability comes in, because the board is going to basically give the superintendent, quote unquote, a free hand on hiring and firing, although statutorily that ultimately resides with school boards. But what this says and what your policies currently say is that we're going to give the superintendent the authority to hire and fire, but it's going to be within the parameters policies that we as a board have established. And every one of you have policies in place that talk about, equitable hiring and diversity and all of that. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, that's where the accountability comes in.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Those are good questions. All right.
I'm gonna go ahead.
So I was going to take up the section 2 under the new. Any question about the mental health resolution? No. All right, then the final section that's voted on by the delegates are those resolutions that are being recommended for deletion. If you look at the handbook, we have 4 resolutions that we are proposing to delete. These can be found on pages 40 to 42 of your handbook. The 4 resolutions, I'm going to quickly go over them. The first one is the early childhood resolution. We're recommending the deletion of this one since the General Assembly has in the state budget fully funded now. 4K for every at-risk student in the state, and those are recurring dollars, so this would be in place here on out. So we're recommending the deletion of that since that is now being satisfied by the General Assembly through the budget. The second one is education innovation. This resolution was adopted in support of Transform SC, which has been disbanded. And so we believe this resolution is no longer applicable since the organization I think they're going to rebrand, or they're going to reform in some other way, but that hasn't happened yet. But when that does, maybe we'll have another new resolution for you. The third resolution is the road management resolution. This was an effort just again to kind of reduce older resolutions, which are more than 10 years old. This was a resolution that was proposed, adopted in 2011. There's never been any changes to it, and we're just recommending that it be deleted. The final one is the statewide turnaround school district. We are recommending deletion of this resolution because it's no longer needed with the passage of the Innovative Schools law by the General Assembly. This was actually a substitute, if you will. The original push was that there was a push for the state to form a statewide school district that would basically take away low performing schools from local districts and put it in the statewide district. But as a compromise or whatever, it was the School of Innovation legislation, which would allow school boards that want to take underperforming schools and apply for them to become schools of innovation, which basically releases schools from regs or state laws that have to be approved by the state board, however, from certain things that tie their hands to let them be more innovative. It would also allow a local board to be able to maybe turn that school over to a private management company if the board so desires, but it gives boards options within the local district and not remove them and put them in a statewide district. So we're recommending deletion of that resolution again because it's no longer applicable with passage of new law. Any questions on any of these deletions? Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna turn it back over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. And I'm going to go quickly through some proposed constitutional changes that you will have in front of you as delegates on Saturday. And if you look on page 43 of your delegate assembly booklet, you will be able to see the proposed constitutional changes. The first change is to Article 5, Section 4, and that's under the certification of alternate delegates. And I actually believe this was a recommendation that came out of Lexington 1. There was some incongruity between the language and requirements for alternative delegates or alternate delegates. And always get that mixed up. So I apologize for that. But basically, in one part, it talks about the board will designate alternate delegates, and later on, it discusses that the board may select alternate delegates. And so the language has been changed to may, because while we strongly recommend that you have alternate delegates in the event that your delegate cannot be at the delegate assembly, and that person can fill in for you, we do not required that you have that. So that's one change. Another change is in Article 6, Section 2, and that's talking, and it includes increasing the approximate number of students in each region from 40,000 to approximately 45,000 to basically reflect the growth trends that we've seen in the state. The board is also recommending in constitutional changes that Horry County, which is currently at about 46,000 students, become a standalone region. And Horry County, if you all approve this, will become Region 4 because of the current average daily membership of students in that district. And this would mean that we'll be moving some districts over to Region 5, and that would be Dillon 3 and 4, and Marion over to Region 5. And then other changes that we have are focused on the fact that we do have some consolidations going on in South Carolina, and changing Clarendon 1 and 3 to Clarendon 4 in our bylaws, as well as, and then I think next year Clarendon's 2 and 4 are going to become just Clarendon County. So we'll have to come back and change that again. But also Hampton's 1 and 2 were consolidated to become Hampton County. And so we are just reflecting that change within the Constitution based on that and the Clarendon consolidations. And those are the only other things that I wanted to mention for the constitutional changes. I think we have a question, Debbie.
We do. Does anybody have any questions about the constitutional changes? Because the question is about the resolution number
Okay,
34.
yeah. Any constitutional change questions?
And I'll
I have
Melvin?
one. I have two, Scott.
Okay.
The first is on the certification of delegates.
Mm-hmm.
The designated deadline is typically how many days in advance of the assembly?
Certification of delegates that's a deadline set by the board, and that's not a constitutional deadline. I'm looking at my assistant over here.
And the reason I'm asking that particular question is because the certification of a delegate is dependent on the delegate's board approving them. Is that the certification process?
The certification process basically is one that boards they vary on. We don't have a requirement in the Constitution or in our board policies related to how certification process occurs, Melvin. That's up to each board to do that. We just require that we get a certification from the chair saying that so-and-so is our delegate.
So my question is, if I have a letter indicating that from my board chair that I am a delegate and it is past the deadline, how is that handled? Are you saying that
the deadline's the deadline. The process is the question you're asking about. I mean, the deadline is one that is set, and we advertise that weekly until the deadline approaches. And then the process itself for certification of delegates is one that you all handle on your own as a board.
Yeah, I understand that, Scott. I guess for me, the question I'm asking is, about the word designated deadline. Is that really needed? But we can move from that. My next question is on Article 6. As you are identifying what regions the different school districts are in, is that based on census data, or how is those regions determined?
That's based on average daily membership numbers that we get from the State Department of Education.
Okay, and do we need to note that, or is that understood?
I think I don't think that needs to be noted in the Constitution. That's the way it's always been. Actually, well, wait a minute. While we're talking, let me look. I think that It's just based on student population is what where do you see that, Becky? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so Melvin, thank you. That is in Article 6. It already says that the regions will be based on student population. And again, we use average daily membership because that's the same thing that we use for the dues formula.
Okay.
And we get those numbers certified from the State Department of Education.
That's okay. All right. Just want to make certain that there's a approval or certification process on those student numbers.
Yes, there is. Any other questions on constitutional issues? Okay. Debbie, did you want to go look at that question?
Yes. So Donnie is asking, is it possible to keep resolution number 34, which has to deal with early 4K, instead of deleting it, to support fully funding of the program for all students, not just at risk? Certainly. If a delegate wants to propose that, you know, I have to go back on the rules, but I think since you could pull that one, right? And when we get to that section, again, you can ask to pull resolution number 34 and have it reconsidered to keep it. So absolutely, you can do that as a delegate.
And during the delegate assembly process, there will come a time where we get to a specific section and the moderator will clearly ask, does anybody wish, we're on section 3 now, does anybody wish to pull a resolution from this section for further discussion? And at that time, you as a delegate would raise your hand, come up to the microphone, identify yourself, and ask to pull a specific resolution. And that applies to all of the sections, but that's the process. But there will be a clear point during the delegate assembly where that becomes appropriate.
I will say that for some, one of the things that may come up in regards to keeping this is that, we're hearing that some districts, they are at capacity. They don't have the facility space to be able to offer for every child to attend to 4K within their facilities. And so I'm just kind of, that may be an issue, or that's discussed by delegates as well, to be able to accommodate all children. Oh, I'm sorry. It says the question is from Billy Gossett and Spartanburg 3. I'm sorry. It says from Donnie there. Sorry, it's what it says on the chat thing. Thank you, Billy. That's a good question, but thank you. I hope I answered it. Okay. Anyone else have a question? These are all great.
Any questions about the delegate assembly process? Going once, going twice. And if you have questions that you think about between now and then, of course, you all know that you can call and just ask for myself, ask for Debbie, and we can help you out with that, with anything you may have. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today on our orientation, and also thank you for your willingness to participate in our business meeting, our delegate assembly. It's a very important meeting. We have a lot of things to accomplish this year in our delegate assembly, and we appreciate your willingness to serve. We also will just remind you that we will see you Saturday at the Charleston Marriott. Delegate assembly starts at 2 o'clock, but we'll start checking in about 1:45. And also, if you're not able to attend, to be sure to have your alternate in place, because we'll have a listing there of alternates who are who are there too. And there will be gallery seating in the back. Last year, because of COVID, we were limiting it to just one delegate per district. We asked you all to do that, and you were very gracious and cooperating with us on that. This year, we're back to normal. And we have districts that have multiple delegates that will be there, and we will have a gallery seating in the back so for those who are not delegates who just want to observe and attend these afternoon session. So at this juncture, unless anybody has any questions related to the delegate assembly, we'll be signing off. And again, I want to thank you all for
Well,
being here.
some people might be upset that we're finishing. Oh, Helen's got her hand up. So you have to Helen, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you, dear.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Helen Frazier from Charleston County. Do we bring our printed copies to the meeting, or are you going to furnish printed copies of the handbook?
Yes, ma'am. I think there are printed handbooks for each of the delegates, each of the delegates at the delegate table, at their table.
Yeah, so we'll have printed books at the table.
Thank
Oh,
you.
and for those in the gallery as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Now, if you've got yours marked up with notes and stuff like that, be sure to bring it. And
Okay.
or you can bring it and Debbie will autograph it for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you Saturday or Friday.
We'll be there Friday. Yes, ma'am.
Debbie,
Thanks for
Yes.
hosting us.
hi, it's Marva wanting to speak.
Hey, Marva.
Hey, this is my first delegate assembly. Is there assigned seatings for districts, or you just sit wherever?
No, there's assigned seating. Each district has a place and a number of chairs for however many delegates the board has. And there's all kind of fun stuff up there, like forms and everything else on the table.
So when you walk into the room, Marva, you'll see signs on the tables that show which districts are positioned where. So,
Okay.
Williamsburg will be clearly designated at some point in the room. I don't know off the top of my head exactly where, but we can help you find that.
And all
Okay.
delegates check in. All delegates check in. They have to be, we have to account for the number of delegates there to determine the quorum and the number of voting delegates present and all that. So all delegates have to check in.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent
you.
question.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, I mean, I know you're sad that we're not going to 1 o'clock.
Excuse me, Debbie. Debbie, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, this is Lynn Fallaw in Lexington 4. This is also my first delegate assembly. And so could you just give me an overview as to what you expect from me?
Well, that's a good question. We would hope that you participate in this orientation, which is great. Hope you have a good feel for the changes to the resolutions that are being recommended, and that you are voting as part of your board. You're representing your board, so your vote should reflect the will of your board, if you will. So hopefully your board has discussed these resolutions and you have a feel for their positions on them and know how to vote.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
And we appreciate these questions.
My last question, Helen Frazier from Charleston. I know that this session is being recorded. Will it be available to our other board members, or how will you disseminate this information out to other board members?
We did record this meeting and we'll be sending an email to board members, letting them know that they can log into it and watch it.
Thank
I'm
you.
assuming we'll be sending that like this afternoon.
Yes.
I'm getting some nodding of the heads over there. So yes, we'll be sending the link to this recording to all school board members this afternoon. And I am told that last year's delegate assembly is on YouTube. Okay. And that comes from Jada. Thank you, Jada, for reminding us of that, because last year we did, because we had the restrictions in place for COVID last year, we recorded the entire delegate assembly. So those who
Yeah.
may want to go back and watch that, and that's a great point, Jada. Thank you. For those of you who may want to go back and watch that on YouTube,
Or have
uh,
never seen, who've never
20
been to delegate assembly.
although it's a lot different, it's going to be a little bit different because we have all the delegates this year as opposed to just one per district. But it'll give you a good idea of the flow of the delegate assembly and questions that come up during the process. So that's a good point. Thank you. Anything else? Going once, going twice. And again, if you have something that you think about between now and Saturday, you can call us, email us, text us, or you can pull us aside if you see us over at the Marriott during one of the sessions before 2:00, because we want you all to enjoy this process. It's a fun process. We sometimes we get tired at nights, but not rare. That's rare. Again, it's a fun process and it's a very important process. And so we do thank you all for your participation and willingness to do so. And we want everybody to feel comfortable in their role, especially you new folks. And like I said, if anybody has any questions or comments, just please let us know. And with that, I think we're ready to sign off. Debbie, got anything? Last words? Thank you all. Everybody have a good afternoon, and we'll see you this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all.